Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough as we preview Toronto's Week 1 matchup in Calgary against the Stampeders. I'm joined by the Calgary Sun and Calgary Herald's Danny Austin. Danny, thanks very much for joining me today. Welcome.
Oh man, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to kind of kick the season off with this. As I've mentioned, I'm a Toronto guy born and raised, so this is fun for me to get to talk Argos and obviously Stamps.
Well, you got to help me out because I've already predicted a Toronto loss here, and I'm very bullish on the team. I actually think that the Toronto Argonauts are going to have a great season. I just think it's too much to go up against the dynasty that sort of is Calgary. You know, 3 of the last 4 Grey Cups they've been in. They've got the best quarterback coach combination in the league. But I look up and down that roster, and I've predicted a Toronto loss, and no one scares me. I'm scared of Bo Levi Mitchell. But that's pretty much where it ends. Like when I'm looking up and down this roster here, like what am I missing? What are those pieces that I should be scared of and I just don't know enough to?
So I'll give you a couple players, but I'll start by saying, and like this is, I think, the important thing to remember about the Calgary Stampeders is there are a lot of players who you would have expected this year to be their breakout year. So guys like Hergy Mayala, who was their first round draft pick in 2019, who had a really, really good back half of the year. His numbers over the full year don't stack up to sort of the star receivers in the league. But if he'd kept up that pace, and it normally takes guys who played, at least he's Canadian, but he played college ball in the States. It takes you 6-7 weeks to get used to the game. And if you go from that point on, he's got real numbers. Same with a guy named Josh Huff at receiver. Markeith Ambles was having a great year and then got hurt. So you had all these young guys who were sort of finding their way in the league, and you'd expect them in year 2 to be good. Then they either got hurt or the year ended because they got started a little bit late. So there is a lot of sort of young talent that, honestly, this was planned. The Stampeders, like, let's remember, they traded Eric Rogers away. They let Juwan Brescison walk. This is intentional. They believed that these players were going to break out and become stars. So no, they are not household names for CFL fans. But I would just caution anyone who looks at that and says, oh, well, they just have a bunch of young guys. They have young guys who they expect to be great. I will also say at running back, like if Kadeem Carey can stay healthy, man, he's fun to watch. Like we don't get running backs like him very often in the CFL. He's got an NFL body. He can run downhill, truck over defenders, but also bounce around. It's just his injury history kind of meant that he came up here instead of continuing his career down south.
Yeah, I would never take Calgary for granted, and that's basically the basis of my prediction. It's just that it's like the Patriots. You know, some years you look down the Patriots roster and you're like, well, Tom Brady's good, and they've got this coach I've heard of, but you know, they find a way to do it. It's not you're not pulling one over on Calgary, and so yes, the Argos have a lot of those big name players from the Stampeders, but there was never any question that, oh, well, you know, foolish Stampeders don't know what they're doing here. I just don't know what it is. And so it's nice to have you help explain, you know, how this is going to happen to me, what may be a very painful Saturday.
And like 5 or 6 days ago, I would have said there were 2 positions that I was worried about if I was the Stampeders. One of them was defensive end. One of them was sort of middle linebacker, although Jameer Thurman was sort of Alex Singleton's partner in his back, and he can play middle or weak side. So one of the linebacker, then D-end. Then they signed Sean Lemon. So D-end, you at least know who's playing there. You've got a veteran. You guys in Toronto know all about Sean Lemon, obviously.
We do.
So like whether or not Sean Lemon's the best defensive end in the league, that's not a question. Then Corey Greenwood, also played in Toronto, is now back after not participating in training camp. So you've got a little bit more depth there at linebacker. I don't see a ton of holes in the starting lineup. I will say that this is true of every team, maybe other than the Argos and linebacker, but like they're 1 or 2 injuries in key positions away from being in real trouble. They need, at the very least, their veterans to stay healthy for long enough that the rookies learn the game and are able to adequately kind of come in and fill in. And I don't think that with no preseason games, I don't think any team is ready for that. But that's going to be the big question in the early going for the Stamps.
So we look at the Calgary offense. You mentioned Ambles and Huff and Kamar Jordan. I assume he's healthy, and I know he's getting a little older now, but you expect him to be out there starting for the Stamps as well, I assume? I
do. There's probably no one I like more in the CFL than Kamar Jordan. He's been a joy to cover since 2016. I will say, I once asked him what he tore in his knee when he got hurt on Labor Day in 2018, and like the answer was just everything.
The Joe Burrow.
He is a guy in his 30s who hasn't really played in 3 years. So while he does seem healthy, he does seem ready to go. Like I think we need to be realistic about what that probably means. And I would imagine that it's more the Ambles, Huff, Mayala, who I would expect to really, really carry the load. And then Kamar is a nice luxury piece, but I don't see him being the focal point of the offense, at least when the ball's in the air.
And you talked about Kadeem Carey, who I really like a lot too. Now, I'm not a huge believer in the running game being based entirely on who the back is. It's more offensive line for me. That's sort of my school of thought. But you can't help but be impressed by his athleticism. Just watching some of his tape and just knowing some of the things he can do physically. I know there are going to be some plays this year where he's making highlights.
Completely. And I mean, just watching in training camp, like you can also sort of slot him in as a sixth receiver some of the time. Like they really seem to be interested in getting the running back involved in the throwing game. So Kadeem Carey, just like, he hasn't played much, and that's the problem. It's just when he's played, he is so dynamic. And the Stamps were at their best when Kadeem Carey was playing in 2019. The thing is, Nick Arbuckle was mostly the quarterback. So we haven't really seen him and Bo play together at all. And that's going to be one of those things that I think is a real area of optimism, at least within the coaching staff and in the locker room.
Are you suggesting there's a difference between Nick Arbuckle and Bo Levi Mitchell?
I am suggesting there is. Okay, now before we get me trapped here, I honestly love Nick as a player, as a human being. I think he is ready to be a starting quarterback. I don't know what happens, obviously, with this decision for week one. Yeah, there was a difference between Bo Levi Mitchell, two-time Grey Cup champion, and Nick Arbuckle, who was like being forced into backup. But I think that like Nick, approaching the season as a starter, getting into a starter's role, there are just little things that I think Nick needs to learn and that the offensive line needs to learn. I mean, that's the thing when we talk about the O-line. It was once explained to me that Bo is the best in the league at when he gets the ball in his hands and is in the pocket, he knows exactly what the offensive line is supposed to do and moves into a position where the receiver can see the ball coming out of his hands. So it just makes it that much easier on everybody. And I was told Nick needed to work on that a little bit. That's like after 2 starts, so you don't expect him to be perfect. But the guy can find his receivers and like does well under pressure. So I am not insulting Nick Arbuckle. I want to be clear on that.
No, Nick's been great too, and it's funny. I was just talking to Coach Dinwiddie this morning or this afternoon about that in the press conference. We were talking about changing the launch point and finding windows because Nick Arbuckle is not the tallest guy in the world, and so you need somebody to move around a little bit. And yeah, he just talked about how Nick's doing a great job of finding those windows and finding space. And maybe that's something that he was able to take from Bo in Calgary. And just because, we've got some guys who may end up playing guard who are like 6'8", which for a 6'1" quarterback is just, may as well be a tower in front of you. But that's where that skill comes in, being able to find those windows. And, if Bo is someone that's just sort of made a living out of being able to do that, hopefully that's something that Nick has been able to kind of jot down in his studying process, learning behind one of the best.
Totally. And I also don't think it's just Bo being good or Bo was good at it and Nick was bad at it. It's that Bo's O-line that had Shane Bergman, had been around for years, and Combre Williams, Derek Dennis. They knew where he was going to go, right? Like you need to develop that little bit of just like understanding. And I mean, that's always what you hear about O-line play. O-line play is all about communication, all about kind of knowing where the guy is going to be next to you. And that includes the quarterback. So it's not a knock on Nick in any way. I just think, yeah, he probably needed a little time. First-year quarterbacks are never as good as third or fourth-year quarterbacks, despite what they'll tell you in Saskatchewan about Fajardo being the best in the league, which is crazy. But, yeah, no, I honestly think Argos fans are going to love Nick Arbuckle. He's sort of a natural leader, and everything that people said in Calgary was like Bo would show up at 4:45 in the morning and Nick would already be there. He just wanted to work as hard as Bo and learn from him and do all the work. So I think you guys got a good one there.
Is Bo 100% going to start? Like, I don't think there's anything that could keep him from starting unless they chain him down. But is he back to practicing and looking all right?
Today, so like training camp, I would have said, I was like, I got a little bit of a question here. But it's also one of those ones where like Bo has been around long enough to not leak things to the media. You know what I mean? So, and the Stampeders aren't going to do that either. So I had heard like, hey, he's dealing with some soreness, some tightness, but I couldn't get a really good read on what it was. And they also were really trying to get a look at their backup. So you couldn't tell if he just wasn't participating because of the injury or whatever. He was back 100% today, did all the first team reps. Seems completely completely good to go.
So let's talk about that offensive line a little bit, because the one area that I think is really going to shock people for the Argos this year is the defensive line. They've looked really, really good. They go too deep that I feel confident could start for almost any team in the CFL. They really are something special, and it's not a position that a ton of people are talking about right now. You've got on the offensive line, Calgary Williams. You mentioned it. Is he playing left tackle? I know he's moved all over the place. I think he even played some center. Is he?
Oh, he's mostly been a center since he joined the Stampeders. Like that's where he's played. Training camp 2019, he was moved to left tackle. That's always where they've sort of envisioned him. I guess he would have been right tackle because Derek Dennis would have been left, but he was moved to tackle. And then a guy named Brad Erdos, who was going to be the starting right guard. Anyways, Brad Erdos had a career-ending injury. They had to move Calgary back, but they believe that's his natural position. Is out there.
And Argos fans are all disappointed that Sean McEwen's in Calgary. He was one of the bright spots of 2019, so I imagine he's impressed everybody there.
Yeah, he looks great. And I mean, the thing with him is also, like, he's a University of Calgary guy, right? So he knows Ryan Sevier, who's the starting right guard. It's a pretty natural fit here. And, like, that University of Calgary Dinos programming, I mean, they're reigning Vanier Cup champions, right? But, like, it's one of those things that really fosters a lifelong bond, it seems. People are bonded to the school, people are bonded to the program, and he seems he's a natural fit here, and he's going to do well. I understand it might hurt Argos fans, but that was a big signing for the Stamps.
For sure. And we're hoping that Peter Nicastro can sort of be the version 2.0 of Sean McEwen. He's a little different because he was mostly a guard at the University of Calgary, but when he did play center, he looked great. And I think that's the long-term plan for him. I can't get anyone to fully commit to that, but he seems to believe that his future is as a center in Toronto. And so I don't know for sure if he's going to line up at center in week one. It could be Philip Blake. They've been kind of rotating them back and forth a little bit. But I think the long-term plan is for Nicastro to be a center. But I love those. Anytime you draft a lineman from the University of Calgary, you're probably making a pretty safe bet. So I have high expectations for him. Do you feel like this line though is up to the task for protecting Bo against what may be one of the best defensive lines in the CFL?
Yes, to a certain no. There you go. There's my answer. I mean, I will say that week one against the Argos, and this is, I hope no one isolates this clip. Like, look, I believe that Charleston Hughes is, in general, for the best 6 to 7 weeks of the season over the last couple of years, the best defensive end in the league. I do believe that there's evidence that he slows down a little bit towards the tail end. He wouldn't like me saying that. I have full faith that he'll probably lead the league in sacks again this year. He's an impact player. He's a difference maker. I wouldn't want to face him in week one. He's comes out explosive to start seasons. That's going to be tough. The Stampeders starting right tackle appears to be a guy named Julian Good-Jones, I believe. I honestly hadn't even paid attention to him until the last day of training camp when we kind of were like, oh, wait, this guy? So that's a rookie who has never played Canadian football before. He can be as good as he wants. It's a learning curve. It's going to be, whether it's Cordero Law or Charleston Hughes, that's not great. The rest of the O-line, I think, is in really good shape, and it's just one of those things where, again, me being there every day for the last 5 years, I know who Justin Lawrence or Zach Williams are. These guys who have been in the system for 3 years have been backing up Shane Bergman, who is arguably the best left guard in the entire league. Like, it's not an indictment on them that they weren't starting. It's just that the best guy was ahead of them, and now they're ready. I believe Calgary Williams is going to be great at that position. I don't think you need to be in the CFL just with the yard off the ball. Like, I think that being a smaller, more mobile guy at those positions on the outside of the O-line is good. McEwen's great. Ryan Sevier made so much progress throughout his first year, and I just think is like completely ready to go. I think the O-line is going to be, if not a position of strength, it's not going to be a problem.
Let's talk a bit about the defense. It's something where I'm pretty familiar with your linebackers. I like Jameer Thurman. We talked a little bit about Corey Greenwood. Now, Greenwood's, is he coming off the bench or is he starting at Mac? What's your sense on that?
Right now, I would suggest that he's coming off the bench.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to try to make that a Canadian position right off the bat. I just think that ultimately they have the depth, but if you make it a Canadian position, if Greenwood gets injured, you really don't have a starter.
Right.
in my opinion. So you might as well stick with it as an American to start because you have enough Canadians all over the rest of the field. So I mean, I think Jameer Thurman, I think he has potential to be the best defensive player in the league this season.
He's good.
Yeah, he's really, really good. And then it's probably a rookie guy named Darnell Sankey has played in the NFL. Linebackers, you expect them to be, because they hit so hard, these big tough guys, and they come in and they're always like so eloquent and soft spoken, and they're like just the nicest guys. And he's one of those. He just seems just gives off the vibe of a guy who's going to succeed, but that doesn't mean we've won.
And what about the secondary? It's not a lot of names I know. There was I read an article that you wrote about Moxley. Is that right?
Jonathan Moxley is, he's going to be the one sort of first year starter in that group. If Argos fans, if you're trying to pay, there are a lot of names you should know, is what I will say. But Moxley is basically, it looks like he's going to be field corner. Deshaun Amos looks like he's going to be the boundary corner. He was the field half last season and had the most interceptions of any non-corner in the entire league. Then he went down to the NFL. I'm shocked he didn't make it. This guy's special. He honestly is. Then you got Richard Leonard, obviously an all-star with the Ticats previously. You have Royce Metry at safety. Canadian, looked great in his first season. He would have been third on the depth chart had Tunde Adeleke not left, and then Adam Berger retired. So, and it kind of came in, no one expected him to play, and he did really, really well. Then they've moved Raheem Wilson into the field half spot. And then you have Jamar Wall at the Sam, who at this point is like Mr. Stampeders. He's been around longer than anybody. He's been a stud there for a long, long time. That is the position, that in my opinion, next to Bo, the defensive backfield is their position of strength. I think it's going to be super dynamic and hard to throw on.
That's terrifying, but good to know. It's always. I knew coming into this, I was bracing myself because as I said, I'm not expecting a win off the bat here. I just think there are too many things working against the Argonauts schedule wise. But hearing you talk about some of these guys, and I know I've got some more film to watch coming up, but I'm slightly less optimistic than I was, and I was already kind of thinking this may not go well. But
it's funny, all of this, I'm obviously a little bit prone. This is the problem with Calgary, is I cover this team. I don't want to appear like a homer, because honestly, I'm from Toronto. I grew up an Argos fan. I'm not a homer. But with Huffnagel and Dickinson, you're just kind of like, why wouldn't I trust you guys? You guys have won so much in the last 10 years. Every time it's time to move out a veteran and bring in a young guy, it works out. So it's just it's really hard to sit here and for me to say oh, well, I don't think that this third-year offensive lineman is ready to start when they think he's ready to start, because they're always right. That
doesn't always happen here.
I know it doesn't.
It's a little different. Although I got to say, this new regime I've been so impressed by since Pinball and Murphy came in. They've been awesome. They've done everything right. And I am really excited about this year. I do think it's going to turn into something. It's just going to take some time. They need 3 or 4 games. And with this shortened schedule, I don't know how much it's going to allow for a slow building process. But I think the offense is going to take a little bit of time to get going. This defense, though, I think, as I said, I think it's going to really surprise people.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that the West teams may beat up on each other a little bit. I'm not convinced that third place in the East doesn't make the playoffs. I don't know that we're going to have a crossover or what have you. Look, the Ticats are going to be good. That's just this is their moment with this team. This is their window. Montreal's got to go out and show it to me again.
They play Ottawa every other week, which is helpful.
That helps. I'm just saying, I think that there is I think that there's a real window of opportunity for the Argos. Look, go 9-5. Even go 7-7, and you're probably going to be okay. And there's enough talent, that is for sure. And you said, you mentioned the new regime. I got to say, and I know Ryan Dinwiddie, but I think that the tone that he is setting is absolutely perfect. It's just workmanlike. And I do think that from the top down, this team just seems to be we're going to get to work. And I like that.
There's a lot of intelligence in the room too. Like just talking to the coaching staff, Ryan Dinwiddie's super smart. Josh Bell, who we were able to steal from Calgary as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
is brilliant. I love watching him. He's one of my favorite coaches to watch on the football field. It's one of the joys of covering training camp.
I
Was
was lucky enough to cover him both as a player and a coach. And
right.
like
Yeah.
guys will die for him on the field. He's just he knows how to speak to players. He's so intelligent, so energetic. You know that he'll go the extra mile, so you do it for him. And like I've rarely seen a position coach who the players just genuinely love like they do him. So yeah, and then honestly, I apologize for just going off, but like a Davaris Daniels is just one of those guys who, whether he ever gets an MOP vote, is just going to go in and do the work and catch the balls that you need to. Eric Rogers, when Nick Arbuckle needs, it's 2nd and 12 and just needs to huck the ball up because he's under pressure, he'll just know where Eric Rogers is going to be, and there's no one in the league who's better at just going up, getting the ball, bringing it down. There's just some really nice weapons on that team.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, as I said, it may take a little bit of time to develop. It's not ideal that Arbuckle hasn't been 100% all camp, and not having preseason is also not ideal, but
Yeah.
it's okay. It's okay. It isn't a must win out of the gate. But is this something like, are Calgary coaches or Calgary players, anyone talking about the fact that this is the Argos filled with former Calgary teams? Because I feel like we might be on a one-sided rivalry here, because people are talking about it a lot. Like it's a question that all the players get asked. How is it going to be for you going back into Calgary? Is that been picked up on at all in Calgary?
Before training camp, we'll get there probably. Today's Tuesday, right? It's
Yep.
a long weekend, so today's Tuesday. We'll start getting to those questions tomorrow and Thursday. I mean, the reality is, because of the way the Calgary has developed players, I mean, almost every team in the league, you're going to be going up against a couple sort of key players who have been in Calgary at some point or another, or coaches. Or like, it's just, the reality is no one's done a better job of developing players over the last 15 years or 10 years. So, but yeah, they're aware of it. And like, they're aware that schedule makers, they know exactly why they did this. They're going to play it up, but other than with Charleston, who seems to have a little bit of resentment towards Calgary, I haven't talked to Eric Rogers. I haven't talked, like, everyone's happy that Nick went and got his opportunity as a starter. Nobody's mad at that. Davaris was in Edmonton. Breskison, like, the reason that they didn't try to really bring back Breskison is they just knew we could get more money elsewhere, and they had to devote money to, Hergy Mayala, who's a Canadian receiver. They had other young Canadian receivers, so they couldn't really pay him, because they had to put that money elsewhere. So Cordero Law, no one in Calgary will ever say a bad word about Cordero Law. He's just the best guy. So, like, it's just, I don't think that there's that resentment. I think there's an understanding. Toronto was spending money, and those guys went and got it. Good for them.
Some of the former Calgary guys I've talked to are nervous that at some point in the game they're going to walk to the wrong bench or go into the wrong huddle or something like that. Because it's weird. Like, some of these guys played in Calgary for a long time. Not all of them, but some of them did. And it's just going to be to have week one, like your first game back in a couple of years, and you're going back to McMahon. Your former home stadium. It's just kind of a strange thing. But like you said, I get why the CFL made the matchups they did in week one.
And it's a fascinating matchup for week one because, I mean, like, who has the advantage here? I mean, Dinwiddie's system is going to be similar. Like, just the connections to Calgary mean that the Stamps likely have a pretty good idea of the general system that the Argos are going to be using. But the Argos also know exactly what Calgary's system is going to be. Like, I don't know who has the advantage there, other than that's Epic Man, and that should help the Stamps out a little bit. These teams also got the best training camp. I mean, like, the fact that they're playing on the Saturday and they were able to take the extra day off and do all that, they're going to be pretty good to go. I just don't, when you are so close to Saskatchewan and have to deal with the noise that comes out of there, I just don't think that the Argos are just going to become the Argos. I mean, the Argos beat the Stamps twice in Grey Cups in the last 10 years. So there's a rivalry there, but I don't think that, like, the former player thing is going to add much for these guys.
Can you give me a prediction?
Low scoring Stamps win.
That's kind of, I'm looking at a 24-20 is sort of how I see this.
Somewhere in there. Like, it's honestly, I do think that the D-line, O-line, like the Argos D-line, that battle is going to decide who wins the game. If you give Bo enough time to just define his receivers, I think the Stamps will do okay. Not anything against the DB group in Toronto, but there's talent there, and Bo is the best quarterback in the league. And I honestly, that's not me being the Stamps reporter. That's just like objective evidence is Bo Levi-Mitchell succeeds more than anyone else.
And if the Argos do win this game, what will have happened?
I think you're going to see, it's honestly just putting Bo under pressure and knocking him down. It's hurting him there. Like, I believe that I don't think the Stampeders want to get in a position where they're not picking up yards on first down. They need to, like, they don't have that veteran that Eric Rogers was the guy. It was just, if it was 2nd and 12, you just threw the ball to him. They don't have that. So I think that the Stamps need to get off to a strong start. They need to limit Charleston. And if you do that, I kind of think that the path to victory is relatively straightforward because, as you said, Nick hasn't played a ton. If it's McLeod Bethel-Thompson, like those guys just, I don't think are quarterback's the most important position. I'm going to pick Bo over either of those guys if it's a tight game.
Well, we'll see how it all goes down. We're only a few days away. I can't believe we're finally going to see some football. So I'm ecstatic about that.
I think about how long I had to talk about the stupid XFL merger, and now I actually get to talk about real football. It's the best thing in the world.
He's Danny Austin. You can find him on Twitter at DannyAustin_9, and you can read his stuff at the Calgary Sun and Calgary Herald. Danny, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been awesome.
Absolutely, anytime, man. This is great.
This has been the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough for Danny Austin. This is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. Enjoy the game Saturday.